Do I see any questions out there? Any hands? Oh, I see a hand over here. And
We don't mind.
Is that by you?
oh, he's going to bring you a mic. So while he's doing that, I'll just sing a little song. No, never mind. That's another show. While he's this gentleman over here.
My question revolves around, like, I guess the type of justifications you use for major automation upgrade projects. I know I work for Praxair. I mean, we have legacy systems running 30 years out there, okay? And there's no want or desire by our operations management folks to replace that system because, you know, the justification for, the justifications just aren't there from a productivity improvement standpoint, et cetera, for that base level control system. You know, from your presentation, I garner, like, you know, with your interlock improvements, you know, it's less support time, et cetera. But what other examples would you give of, like, the justifications for entering into these upgrade projects that you give to upper management to basically pay for them?
Yeah. You know, one of the things I'll share that I didn't share that maybe is unique for us as a plant site just because of our size is, you know, one of the things that really concerns me and keeps me up at night is when we look at the time that it takes us to replace just one of those 60 systems that we have, and we've gone ahead and tried to lay out a life cycle plan for all the systems in our site. I mean, that's like a 40-year plan. And so even though it's hard to justify today in terms of replacing any one of those systems, I think we've also realized that it's not realistic to think that if we don't get started on some type of a modernization plan, we're going to find ourselves in a point of no return to where we can't replace them fast enough before they're going to fail and be in a state that we can't repair them and can't recover from them. So one of the things that we've tried to do too is to just show that roadmap in terms of a need of just modernization effort over time to say that if we don't get started now and work at a reasonable pace, we're definitely going to find ourselves at some point where they're definitely unsupportable. So,
Thank you.
Just one follow-up. But I mean, do you get pushback even with that when it's like, I mean, when the going gets tough, right? I mean, economy takes a dip. I mean, that's the first thing that gets cut, right?
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
That's my frustration, as you can tell. I mean, we again have systems out there 40 years, and we put those plans out there 10, 15 years ago saying this is already well past its life cycle, but it's the thing that just keeps getting cut over and over and over again. And unfortunately, as controls folks, we're pretty, you know, intuitive, right? And we're flexible and
continue to make it work,
right? Go on eBay, whatever.
Yeah,
you know,
we do that.
find parts, right? So
Yeah.
it's like we're our own worst enemy. So,
Yeah, but I think overall, there is this burning platform of reliability of your automation system that will bring your plan down. On the other side, you're an engineer, right? So what opportunities do you see when you replace the current system? And I think, you know, Steven gave a fantastic example, you know, you replace something, add functionality so that, you know, you shorten downtime because of fewer interlocks, smarter interlocks, you know, give better information for operators. And I'm pretty sure that, you know, if you replace a 30-year-old system, there must be other benefits that you may be not aware of, but that are there. Think about optimization. Can you optimize your plant with the current DCS system, yay or nay? Can you remotely work with that? Can you do some troubleshooting? So the question is, what are the biggest opportunity for the plants that you have, and how does automation play a role in that? So basically, but I understand management requesting return on investment. I think it's the right thing that they have to do.
I'd like to put a shameless plug in for the next session after mine. One of the things that ARC has been able to do with the help of one of our ARC associates is to help customers monetize what the change would actually bring to the plant, so that it puts it in dollars and cents. That says if you do this, this is what you can expect. And that helps you get management on your side. When they can see that there's true money to be made by fixing something. We found historically that if you try to use the argument, this stuff is failing and I have to buy stuff off of Google to replace it with old parts, the answer is going to come back, is it still running? And so if it's still running, they say, well, what's the problem? So you need some way to monetize this. But before we go into any more questions from the audience, I would like to bring Nicholas Yim into this discussion a little bit. Now, he's a project manager for Yokogawa America, and I'm sure he's seen a lot of these. So a question I had for him was, what are some of the challenges that you see facing brownfield type of migration? Because we've been talking about brownfields pretty much here. Nick?
Yeah, first, my name's Nicholas Yim, program manager with Yokogawa. About 16 years automation work, working with Steven and his company on replacing a DCS and modernizing that. Some of the challenges that we're seeing up front when they actually get the go-ahead to go forward with this project are, obviously, you guys have no space. There's power limitations. Just a simple change from operations and how it may impact their ability to accept the new change. But you got the physical constraints are the biggest challenges, and that's one of the biggest challenges we're seeing. Is no space inside the buildings. You got to go outside and come up with different solutions. And in this case, like Steve mentioned, you've got to have ample time to replace these systems. So I think organizing a phased gate approach of projects, doing a detailed feed, and in this case, during our feed, we came up with multiple solutions of trying to attack this issue of a legacy systems, 30, 40-year-old systems, and we didn't get it right on the first time. And the good thing about a collaborative environment was that the end user knows the facility. I think we know the technology, but how do you have a common balance between that to come up with a good solution? So it took a couple times to go to the whiteboard, erase it, and redo it. And I think some of the latest technology out there that we had really wasn't our first option for this footprint. So went back and looked at that, and we came up with the solution in the feed. And I think one of those things that came up was the interlock thing as well. But the driver was obviously obsolescence, older hardware, and just reliability. So I would say space, definitely on a brownfield site, would be the biggest challenge of getting around.
Yeah, I think I've heard that many times. Michael, do you have any additional? You had some really great ones during your presentation. I like the flooding in Houston problem that you solved.
Well, we didn't like this flooding in Houston.
No, I don't mean, I didn't finish my sentence,
No.
You solved it.
Yeah. No, but I think one of the things that we also have seen, and Janet Brightwell is here from Dow, she's heading up quite a bit of those migrations. What you do see is if you have a legacy system like a Bailey 7000 system, and you migrate to ABB 800XA, typically you also see more stable control, and you can also increase feed rates. So part of the, what you find out later is that, hey, the LP2 plant was an example of that, where we have hodgepodge of old systems. We replace that by the 800XA, and all of a sudden the plant can run higher rates. So I think in that aspect, it's maybe a hidden way of something you find out later, how you can justify it. Typically, a 1 or 2% feed increase wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. Steve, you want to add any comments to that, or are you good?
I'm good.
Okay.
I just had one more comment. As far as the space, obviously you're dealing with the physical constraints of the existing wiring, right? So everything's not going wireless yet. You still need that tight control. But the wiring and how to replace it without a lot of downtime. That's the other constraint is you have 1-2 week windows of shutdown windows where you've got to demo it out, you've got to install it, and you've got to wire it up, and you've got to loop check and test and commission, and so it's a lot of activities just from that perspective, and then obviously operations and maintenance gets involved with some of those things. But I think trying to find a good balance between all of that is the biggest challenge.
Do we have any, here's a question way in the back. I'm going to make you run, Alan.
Hey, Hans, no nasty questions, huh?
All right.
Okay. My name is Hans Meerdink from Dow Chemical. I got a question for Steven. You mentioned all the different systems that you have on site. Is there any efforts going on in Eastman to standardize on certain systems, on certain system vendors to have less of that? Or what's your vision on that?
There is. We are looking to at least reduce that footprint significantly, but it's going to take obviously decades and decades and decades. But yes, we are looking to reduce that footprint.
I know it's a challenge because a lot of companies have grown by acquisition. I know, even within in Dow, where you had your own control system for a long time, then you acquired Union Carbide, and that sort of changed, and it's been changing ever since, right?
Yep. Union Carbide and then some others. And now we have the merger with DuPont, and we're going to split up. So part of DuPont is going to stay with Dow. So all the legacy systems that DuPont has basically will be part of our heritage.
Yeah, and so I'm sure you're, I'll just put words in your mouth, but I'm sure you're looking at opportunities to get everybody on a similar path.
So your question is, what is our vision for the future? That's a good one, Dick.
I was trying to be polite.
And I think we're working on that. There is no unified version at this point of time. Clearly, we like to limit the number of suppliers. And we have very good luck with ABB for the last 10 years. But you also have to be realistic, Senior management also likes to look at, hey, do we have alternative approaches as well, so that you can compare and contrast and go forward.
Yeah.
But clearly having lots of experience with one supplier, also gives you the opportunity to do the perfect installation.
Thank you. Any other? All right, I have a question related to these projects tend to be quite long. I mean, 6 years, longer. How do you keep the team together and focused on their mission, and particularly when you divide them into specific assignments? How do you do that? Michael, you want to start?
Yeah. So the first thing you need to do is monitor. Talk to the people, understand what keeps them busy. And for the people you really don't want to lose, you have to understand how they feel in their job. So, and then, like I explained, that we had chartered efforts. So one way to bring some variety in their daily life is to let them lead one of those charters. Plus, you have 14 different projects. There is an opportunity for people to not just to work on one single project, but leverage their knowledge to other projects. So they get to expand their network, they see different technologies, so that helps as well. And then, there is of course the inevitable that some people at the end will say, well, despite the fact that everything is hunky-dory, I'm going to move on, either for family reasons. And we had very few of those, I have to say, and especially if you're further halfway of a project, people like and want to see the end of it. So they stay until the very end and then they move on. So you have to bring them halfway and then they get in the flow of the project and then it's downhill from there. But it's not easy. You have to understand their personal wishes, you have to understand their professional wishes, and kind of marry that with a plan so that a 6-year project is not a single project, but it's kind of an opportunity to grow professionally.
Well, I can see that. It's important to keep track of how the people deal with things. Nicholas, you had an example you told me about earlier. in terms of doing a loop-by-loop project. I think you were telling me that, or maybe it was Steve. Maybe I got it confused. You know, doing a transition project where you were basically, the plant was still running and you had to do loop-by-loop changes.
Yeah, we were involved with a large petrochemical facility years ago, and that was a conversion project from pneumatic instrumentation to foundation field bus. That required, you know, core teams, like Michael mentioned, right, and staying together. But that was over a duration, I believe, of 8 or 9 years, cutting over the facility hot, right, no downtime. That gave the end user the ability to produce the entire time. Turnarounds were hectic, you know, but you know, for the most part, the core team had stuck together, at least on the automation side, through 2 or 3 different phases to allow continuity, you know, lessons learned, and just better execution. So, core team on the automation side is definitely a plus, keeping that together. I know probably on Michael's side or the end user side, your teams are probably a lot larger when you're expanding to, you know, cross operations and maintenance and project people. But core team would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and I think IPA has proven that, you know, if you change major leads, and for me an automation lead would be one of those, if you change it out during the life of a project, you know, the project is going to get delayed or have issues with quality. So there is a big benefit, as Nicholas is indicating, to keep that core team together.
Steve, you want to add anything to that?
I'll just say my situation is a little unique in Kingsport in that the folks that are working on that project are already located there. And so basically, they're working on some project of some type anyway. So
Okay.
it's not kind of unique as maybe in Michael's situation where you've got a lot of folks that have relocated, you know, to come in on a multi-year project. So really keeping them engaged in that multi-year project has not been a challenge for us in that basically, you know, they're already there. They're in-house essentially, so.
Yeah. Well, it sounds pretty interesting in terms of the concept of what you're doing too, so I imagine that helped them intellectually to want to stay in that.
Well, we'll say that in some cases we've swapped people in and out of those multi-year projects too from a cross-training standpoint. I mean, that's a great opportunity for us given that we still have so many systems on site and will for a number of years. So it's an opportunity for us to really train folks up on a different platform and really make them, we would say, multilingual.
Right.
So.
Good, good. Do I see any hands out here? I'm going to ask you guys a question in a minute.
Actually-
Before I do, it seems to me that particularly when you look at a project that lasts 6 years, there's a lot of changes that occur during that project, including maybe there's new features and functions that come out with the control systems or software that you're putting in your system. So, you know, how do you manage the risk associated with those changes that occur over a long-term project? Nick, you want to start?
Well, I guess you have that balance between innovation versus standardization. Everybody, you know, at the beginning of the project does want to standardize and does want to do things more efficiently and replicate it, right? That's common goals for a lot of companies. Like you said, there are changes and there are things that happen. Having visibility into that roadmap of some of the technology, first of all, helps a lot, so you can help plan out, right? Yeah, it's a difficult one to manage, especially on a long project like that. By the time you get done, you could be upgrading the first one that you did already, right? I think it's still something that hadn't been solved yet. A lot of, I guess, reliance is on you know, things like Microsoft, right, and getting those things up. But there is technology out now with virtualization and sort of different solutions like that allow you to be a little more flexible. So I think we are making a step change in automation with some of the newer technologies.
I'll just say in general that we've kind of taken an approach or philosophy that consistency is more important than perfection. And so we've really tried to, develop our standards and stick to those, unless there is just a notable change that we feel like we can make that would just be a marked improvement. And we feel like we can then go back and retroactively basically implement that to stay consistent. And so.
Well, basically today you want to install a system that has some future-proof characteristics to it, right?
Yeah, and I think the one thing I may like to add, ABB is here in the room. You have to collaborate very closely with your suppliers, so they know your schedule and you know their innovation schedule. Let me give an example. ABB went from a system version 5 to system version 6, and we pushed them quite a bit to make certain deadlines so that we could use them in the plant, so that the moment we started the plant, that we had the latest and greatest system version. But it required us kind of to plan around it, have a charter, work with ABB, get all the bugs out, and then basically roll it out as such.
Good point.
But you need to kind of integrate those two schedules, and that requires you to collaborate in this situation with the R&D from ABB.
Yeah. I think we have a question down here.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Not yet.
My question is about wireless devices. Are you guys, so it's for end user and for vendor also, from both standpoints. Are you guys seeing a lot of control being done through wireless, or is it monitoring only as of now? What about the interlocks? Are we doing those, or do you see a future for that, doing wireless communication? So what are the trends from the end user standpoint and from vendor standpoint?
I'll say from my standpoint, it's still pretty much monitoring. We're really not doing much, if any, control at all via wireless.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just from the latency and, I guess dependability on the battery itself. Control's got to be, it's mostly all done hardwired.
So you're kind of talking future. So it's obvious we haven't dared to go in that direction as such. I know that in the mining, storage, and pipeline, we've used some wireless transmitters for control, but that was only done after a lot of considerations and looking at the impact if it stopped working. But the big thing is keep it simple, right? And how much complexity do you add by having wireless transmitters? And I think it's quite a bit. And using the regular 40 to 20 milliamps signal makes it, I think, in our eyes, still simple, because it is what the majority of the instruments have. So you help the people who have to maintain it as such. So the answer, not yet.
How many people in this audience are actually engaged in a major project right now, major automation project? Okay. See a few hands. I assume you're looking at and listening to some of the things that we talked about here, and I'm wondering if the panel has thought about some of the things like this, particularly the one that gets me is this whole cybersecurity issue. This is a big issue going forward. Do you feel like the systems you've put in are able to adapt and absorb the cybersecurity impact in the future? Anybody want to make a comment?
So let me start, and then the others can follow. We did a charter with ABB to review the cybersecurity aspect. We used the ICS CERT spreadsheet. We worked with them and completed it as such. We found some vulnerabilities. We worked on those, and at the end, we felt we were comfortable. Are we cyber secure as such? The answer is no. We have minimized the risk, but we didn't eliminate those. Yeah. That's kind of how I see it. Yeah. And there are some best practices. We follow those as much as possible. We've reviewed and checklisted those, make sure that we have done those. But so I'm fairly okay, but not 100% okay.
Yeah, I'll say certainly cybersecurity is consuming a lot of our resources right now. We've got a lot of attention on that right now. I feel like we've got a lot of vulnerability, especially in a lot of our acquisition sites, a lot of those smaller manufacturing sites around the globe. One of the things that we've done corporately recently, though, is we have formed a corporate automation architecture team, we've called it. And that's kind of a combination of some folks from IT and OT that have come together, and their focus is just on the automation space. And so they're doing a lot of look and redesign just in terms of our networking and security aspects of our automation systems, and rolling out some kind of new standards and practices for us to follow, both on new installations and then retroactively as well on existing, to kind of address increased and improved security for our systems.
Thank you. Nick?
Maybe from my perspective, I've seen it on both sides. I've seen some end users have a lot of interest in there, right? And they attack those up front, and they put that into a project, and they identify the risks, and they put in solutions for that. And then I've seen the other side, maybe, like what the guy from Praxair said is, they don't have the budget, right? So their first priority is to replace hardware. So sometimes it's an afterthought. And now the solution net is getting a lot broader for controls and automation. Before it was a PLC and HMI or a DCS and historian, and now it's going all the way from instrument level all the way to the business network. So the automation solution is a lot broader now, and so we get various ones, right? And it's a lot easier to put those cybersecurity solutions up front in the project instead of afterthought. And usually it's they have an incident, and then you've got to hurry up and put something together and rush, and then it's not fun for anybody.
Great. All right, well, do we have any more questions out here? Are there any questions that the panel would like to ask the audience?
Yeah, I had a question for the Praxair person. Have you guys had any incidents or shutdowns that related to loss of production due to obsolescence hardware or those issues? And if you did, were you able to quantify that to bring this up to your management and saying, hey, this is costing us X amount of hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars or whatever it is?
Well, I guess that's a problem, because we really haven't, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, we've been, as opposed to Stephen, who mentioned 40-odd different systems, or, in their plants. I mean, we have plants all over the world, but the control systems are all amongst 3 or 4 different, the same vendor, 3 or 4 different versions or products, right? So, when we do replace them, we have this large, and now we generate a large installed spare base, right? And so we're able to quickly get parts and move them around, have them strategically located, et cetera. So that really hasn't affected us. If it did, absolutely, right? You quantify it just as easy as anybody else, right? Even though it's a continuous process. I mean, we know the production rates, and we could quantify it without too much of a problem. That's kind of where it comes in when I said, well, we're almost too good at what we do. All controls people feel that way, right? I mean, we can program anything, and we can get things running when they're down. We'll go to great lengths, and we're kind of our own worst enemy, because then that just reinforces the fact that, oh, we don't need to replace that this year. We can hold off because we've survived that kind of stuff in the past. So I hate to say, I mean, that's like you certainly don't want to wish that on your own company, right? And say, well, geez, boy, I wish they would just feel the pain a little bit on this, because we do need to replace that stuff. And I have the same fears as was mentioned up here, where you have all these systems, you want to develop a roadmap, and the really old systems we have now that aren't upgraded, I mean, they're creeping right up on the heels of the 20-year-old systems that we have even more of out there, right? Yeah. And so on. So I like the approach of laying that out and saying, hey, we got to start right now before this really becomes an issue, because we only have so many resources and so on. I do have one more question. So you mentioned using contractors, right? MACs, did you call them?
We called them MACs, yeah.
MACs.
Main automation contractors.
So how do you reinforce your programming standards? I mean, is it just implied that you can hand those over and say, program this to look just like that? Or is it, do you have to bend and work together to develop standards together that you can both live with in order to hand over that work on projects?
Would anybody like to add?
Yeah,
answer that?
I can field that one. Yeah, it's definitely not a turnkey project where you say, all right, here's the high level scope of the project, and we want you to just upgrade this. For examples, on past projects, there usually is an existing system, and some of that data we can get out. And the problem that you have also is some of that existing programming or application is dead code. You really want to convert some of that stuff over. So it does take time and energy on both sides to come up with those specifications and templates and those sort of standardization things on HMI to control logic to your architecture. But you have to have a good solid working relationship. There's some give and take. That's kind of how this interlock thing came up. They came to us with an issue, and then we came to the table and we sat and we actually developed a product for that. But for the main control systems, it is requires a lot of proof of concept testing to go through it to make sure this is what you want before you actually get to FAT or startup or whatever that is. And that may involve the control engineer. Operations have a lot of feedback, and that's another stakeholder that's involved. There may be advanced process control people that's involved. People like Steve and his support group who are going to be supporting it after we, come and leave, right? So I guess my answer would be, yeah, it's not black and white. It's hand in hand, right?
I was just going to say, because we're kind of new to it, we're still doing a whole lot of looking over their shoulder and backseat driving, so.
Yeah, I think the moral of the story is choose your partners wisely, but work with them. Don't leave them all alone.
It's a lot more difficult to specify how your software looks like than a vessel. A mechanical vessel,
Yeah.
very simple. You give dimensions and test pressures, and then you're done. Even after 30 years having worked in the software business, I don't know how to specify the way we develop our software, how it needs to look like, and put it on one A4 and hand it over to somebody like ABB. Say, hey guys, this is how it is. So it goes back to what was said here. You have to collaborate, explain why you want why, and sometimes you get feedback that you can do it smarter. But typically, it's a process that it takes many steps, and it takes, I think, a process automation engineer, at least 6 months to a year to really kind of internalize that the programming style that a company has used on a broader basis. So, but you can ask the MSc to do that, but you have to pay for that education. They want to do that for themselves.
Excellent. Well, again, suggest if you can, stay for the next session. I think you'll get some ideas about how you can monetize your requirements. And I'd like to have you, the audience, join me in thanking the panel for an excellent job of presenting how the issues they've solved through some hard work and some smart thinking. Thank you.